To get started with the fork seals, I suspended the bike up with a couple of straps to the rafters of my shed, and the bike feels pretty stable. I basically clamped them down on the handlebars and it held up pretty well. So the first things that you gotta start doing is removing the bolts. I removed the brake calipers, the bolts on the fork. These are, make sure you suspend the brake calipers on something so they just don't hang down. The brake hoses have these bolts that you have to remove on both sides. You have to remove the axle in the front to remove the tire and the forks. It is a pretty tight bolt, so use a hand wrench and just break it free, and then you can use an impact wrench to get it fully out. I suggest using somebody to help you because you have to drive the axle through and lift up on the wheel to remove the weight. Once that's off, the wheel will just pop out. I used a thin rod and a little hammer to kind of push the axle out because it was kind of pretty stuck and there was very limited lubrication on the axle. With 10mm wrench, I basically undid the fork triple tree. This is the further down the forks. I just loosened it and I put the bolts back so I didn't lose them.
Tão fácil com isto.
And do them on both sides, and then you have the bolt up on the top triple tree. You might use a hand wrench to remove the bolt, and then on the other side. One thing I forgot to do is the speedometer cable needed to be removed. After that is done, start pushing down on the fork and it should slide out. I had some stickers on the fork that made it very difficult to get through the triple tree. You see me struggling moving it left and right, but it does go down. And I used a screwdriver to pry the fork, the triple tree, just a little bit. I just put it in between the little line and I just pushed it a little bit, and that really helped to separate the triple tree to let the forks down. You can see like it goes down much better if you do it that way. And do it one fork and then do the other fork. After you get the forks out and you inspect them, you have to pry up with a screwdriver the dust cap. You can inspect it to see if it's good, but I'm just going to replace these with all balls fork seal kit. Now I'm going to remove the other one. You just take a thin screwdriver. Try not to damage the fork seal, but since I know I'm going to use a brand new one, I'm not too worried about, damaging it. I just don't want to damage the fork itself. So here it comes. And it's a pretty simple way of getting it. That's the fork that's holding the oil, so that one's fine. It's the one on the right that's messed up. You can see the fork seals. The leaky one has got oil all over, and the other one looks dry. You can see it there. This is the dry dust cap. And now you have a clip inside the fork, and you take a screwdriver and you just push it up slightly and you can see it come out. You don't push it too much. It should come out really easy, and here it comes. This prevents the fork seals from separating. It's like a clip that just holds it. And do it on both of the forks. The following step should have been done when the forks were still on the bike, but I didn't, so I had to put it in a vice clamp, and I used the tool to unscrew this. It's a 10mm, I believe, hex bolt. After that's done, you can basically pour out the oil from that hole, and I forgot which, I think this is the bad fork seal. The one, and it seems like water has gotten in there. and I'm pumping the water out. If you keep doing this and you push it up as if you're about to separate the fork, the top and the bottom, that's what you want. You just want to push it as it's coming out, and there we go. And that's what you have to do. And this is the other fork. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Notice how different the oil is. You can see there's a really big difference in the oil. So this is what happens when you have a bad fork seal. You can see that water has gotten into one fork. Now that I got the forks all out, I'm basically going to inspect all of these. There's some important parts to this fork that I might have to order some parts, so we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Right now I have them separated. I put them on the floor so I know what belongs on what. And here's the oil difference. It's pretty obvious that one is bad and one is good. So I took some time to clean all of these parts out from the forks, the bushings, all the fork, the outside, the inside. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any rust on the fork, so if there was, I just, removed it a little bit. There was quite a few nicks on the outside of the fork, which I hope don't affect the fork seals. I don't think they do. It's kind of above the fork seals. These bushings seem fine, so I'm going to reuse them. You have to remove the damping rods through the opposite way, so you just slide them out. And there's a spring attached, so don't lose that. But I just cleaned it out, cleaned everything out. When I examined the fork seals, it actually didn't look like they were in bad shape. These are the old fork seals, so I'm not sure how oil was seeping out. When you take the fork apart, it does seem a little bit daunting, but the mechanisms are actually very simple. So the thing that I have to keep in mind is that I should take things out and kind of label them the way I put them out. For me, it helped to have this video because I refer to it as I'm doing things. On the internet, I found a very good way of, bashing in the fork seals. I just took some tape. It helps to have the blue painter's tape and use that. But I used this one, and then I put the seal, and I just gave it a good slam, and it did go down pretty well. You just have to make sure that you put plenty of tape. It does seem like a waste of tape, but I don't do fork seals very often, so this seems to be fine. The one thing I don't show here is putting in the clip that holds the fork seal in place. First put that in, and then you put the dust cap on top of that. The dust cap was actually difficult to put in, but it does go in. Remember to also put in some grease in the fork seals. I didn't have to measure the weight of the oil. I got just one of these bottles, and I put the 150 millimeter mark on the steel rod, and I used that as reference. So they say to compress the fork all the way without the springs or anything in there, and then add the oil, and then just take a reference mark. And I use that little steel rod. You can use a ruler or whatever you have. This seems to work pretty well, and I measured it to the top of the fork. And then after the oil is placed, I raise the fork back up, put the spring in there, the washer, and the steel tube. And of course you have to compress the spring a little bit while you put this top bolt. Then afterwards it was a simple just slide into the triple tree, tighten it up, and you can see it went on pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with this fork seal job.